Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
And I have bad posture today. I'm just like sinking. I was like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And then like my body just started sinking lower and lower. Like as soon as we started recording, I was like, wait, no, I'm melting.
I've given up on like good posture because both like my chair at work and my chair here at home are a million years old. So like the hydraulic part of that sets the height is broken on both of them. So even if you like set it up where it's supposed to be, within like 5 minutes, you're back down on the ground. So it's like, fuck it.
I always have really bad posture, but I try to keep I can't say I try to have good posture for the show, but I try to stay upright. And I'm failing at that right now. So
for years when we were doing the video game podcast, I had to record. I didn't have to, but like to get better, not background noise and stuff, I'd record from a laptop, but from my bedroom, which always meant I was sitting or like kind of laying on I hate the term like laying on because that makes it sound like you're laying in there like you would to sleep. And that wasn't the case, but like lounging,
that would be awesome.
On the bed.
If I could do this show would be because this is your week. So like it's literally how I fall asleep. Like I just listen to like stories in the same vein of our show and I fall asleep every night. So
and I know how I drone on. So you would not, I don't think you'd stay awake through the podcast. Like by the end,
absolutely not. You would have to sign off for me.
Really quietly, because I wouldn't want to wake you up. I'd be like, well, that's been a good show, everybody. Join us next week.
No, but usually it happens is about after like 20 minutes, like I've kind of, knocked myself out, but then like, I'll just sort of come out of it just for a moment, like, oh, he's being too loud. And then I turn it off, like
I just get the Discord disconnect sound randomly.
Yeah. You just hear the boom, boom. And then I'm gone.
Fair enough. I wouldn't blame you one bit, but
we would blame you, dear listener, if you were to tune out this early into the Non-Essential Podcast every week.
I feel like it is a test that we put them through because we start every week with about 5 to 10 minutes of just babbling.
Well, after 15 years of episodes, we're actually going to drop the Non-Essential test based off everything we've done. So I hope you've been paying attention. You fuckers. You're going to fail this shit if you're not. Because when society has fallen, we'll be the last source of knowledge.
There's nothing more stable than a podcast that doesn't depend on an audience or money to keep it going.
The only thing furthering knowledge is two pretty bored dudes. Yeah. Especially now with nothing to go do. But yeah, this show, if you haven't heard it before, any podcast could be your first podcast. If this is your very first podcast of all time, that sucks shit. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, please. Yeah, don't judge.
Try
the whole
another one
and
then come back to us.
I'm confident saying that though, because honestly, me, I'm like the most self-deprecating, like modest person. But I do feel like there's 50-50 out there. If you try another podcast, it'll either be way worse or way better than ours.
It's kind of like if your first like alcohol is something weird, like nobody starts with like fucking basement peppermint schnapps that's been there for like 25 years. Except me. That's actually a true story.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I drank. was some shit like that, but that's what we are as a podcast.
I think my very first alcohol was a bottle of Rolling Rocks. So that's not a terrible way to start. It's not my favorite beer, but it's not a bad beer.
I mean, I guess like first alcohol for me was probably like Coors or something, but first thing I got like shitty drunk on was whatever the fuck I found
peppermint schnapps in the
fucking liquor cabinet. And I tried all of it. There was like butterscotch schnapps, and that was the worst fucking thing ever.
But when I was in college, that's the kind of peppermint schnapps, butter. I mean, we would do shots of that, like just drink it straight. It was like, and I don't know how, like now, if you even like offered me one, I'd probably punch you in the throat.
Like I'm feeling genuinely sick thinking about it because we had like knockoff, like store brand sports drinks. And we were just adding this shit. So it was like, see what happens when we pour butterscotch schnapps into like lemon lime, not Gatorade. And turns out what happens is you get fucking filthy drunk. But like emphasis on filthy because you're going to fucking throw up. And those were the good old
less
days.
about the alcohol at that point. It's just your body like, what are you doing? I'm just going to short circuit now. Like, yeah.
But God, you know, you can never reclaim that because, you know, like I'm almost 30 now. So it's like, you know, now it's like I would never drink that shit. That's gross. But that state of mind you're in when you're really like that fucking maniacally depressed as a teenager. And it's like any poison you can get into me, let's do this shit. Yeah, you know, there was a sense of fun there. Like there was a real looseness, living on the edge, that could only come from drinking old man booze that was buried deep in a cabinet and forgotten.
Good old days.
Yeah. Now it's sad when you're like, I'm 28 and I'm like nostalgic. Like, like you shouldn't feel that way. Anyway, this show, we tell each other stories and, you know, that's it. There's no real rhyme or reason to it.
No, not really. Yeah, different stuff each week. It can be true stories, fake stories, whatever. One week I'll probably just read off some recipes, like 3 tablespoons of butter.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
You cook and I pretend to.
You cook. Yeah. I don't know. You put some dishes together.
Yeah.
But, this week, I do have a topic this week, after having to take last week off just to like refocus myself.
Yeah, there's a lot of weeks, throughout this pandemic, like where it's just like, man, fucking life. Like,
yeah,
I just need to.
And normally, like, we fall back to like a creepypasta, and I just didn't want to do that. Not because I think I like those episodes a lot, but we've done a bunch of them recently, and it's like I don't really want to just
people with them.
Yeah, yeah. Because then we do become a podcast with a singular theme. Although this week's theme is one that it very much falls in our wheelhouse. In fact, so much so that I've checked like 7 times to make sure that you haven't covered this yet. And there's still a chance that maybe you have. I don't.
What's funny is we'll probably get through the whole story and I won't know if I've covered it on the show or not. Like I'll probably know everything about it, but be like, did I ever actually talk about it?
That's the thing too. I'm pretty confident that you've probably heard of this person. Maybe not. Hopefully not. It's more fun when you haven't. But given your set of interests, you probably are familiar with the story at least. But I don't think you've covered it on the show. So, Bela Kiss was born in Hungary in 1887. He became a successful tinsmith, and in February of 1912, he moved to the village of Zinkota, I think I'm saying that right, probably not, with his second wife, Marie. But sadly, soon after the move, Bela discovered that his wife was having an affair, and soon she and her lover ran off, leaving Bela alone in his new home.
Well, at least he kept the home.
Yeah, I mean, that's
you want a roof over your head when you're, maybe gonna end it all.
I didn't put this in my notes, but his wife, it's his second wife, but she was 15 years younger than him. And he was 35 at this point, so she was 20. So she was pretty young. It was one of those, like, she probably just found somebody her own age. It's like, yeah.
That's the thing. Like, you can't be, I feel like when there is that kind of age difference, like, when she bolts, like, I feel like you can't be like, hey, what the fuck? I thought we were forever.
Yeah, I would think probably more so now than back then, because back then it was pretty normal to have those age differences, but you have different like interests. And like in my head, I picture like, yeah, at 35, I would have got home from work and just wanted to watch some like sports on TV and then go to bed early. And she'd be like, let's go to the, concert or whatever, that kind of,
yeah.
It's not uncommon for when there's a big age difference like that for people to like find somebody that's more in their groove or their peer group and run off. And so that's what happened. Fortunately, his heartbreak wouldn't last too long, though, because Bela was successful, handsome, and well-liked. It didn't take long before he started to be seen with a constant stream of attractive women by his side. He hired a woman by the name of Miss Jakubik, I'd probably say butchering that, who he treated well. She was an older lady, and he hired her as a housekeeper. In turn, she kind of ignored the slew of women that Bela would bring home because, back in the early 1900s. If
you're just a housekeeper, that's none of your business, is it?
Well, right. And she knew that. She kept to that. She's like, I'll just clean house and do what I'm supposed to do, and I won't judge you for all these women that I keep seeing you with. So, good arrangement there. But though he was well-liked, Bela was never spent much time socializing in town and stuff. It's one of those... probably how people describe me, because I get along with a lot of people, but I don't go out of my way
with
to talk to them.
Women.
Yeah, that too. No, I'm missing the handsome and successful part. Just most people, I think in general, think I'm okay, but I'm not social. I don't go out. It's like, whatever.
Where this is going, I'm like, do you really want to 10 minutes in to the show be like, I actually relate a lot to this guy.
Yeah.
I get it.
No, I do not. Anyway, so he wouldn't socialize a lot, although he was often seen traveling to town to purchase large metal barrels. If you've listened to our show, you already know where I'm going. Yeah. By this time, the threat of World War I was increasingly present, and Bela had the foresight to stock up on gasoline in case fuel became rations.
He saw that game Donkey Kong and said, that's the best way to fight them off.
When the Nazis start climbing up this hill, I'm going to throw barrels at them. They'll never make it.
Get to the top of the fire escape, fend them off.
Hitler. But yeah, people started asking, like, why are you buying these barrels? And he said, well, the war's coming. I want to stock up on gasoline in case it gets rationed, which... seems like a pretty smart thing to do. Although that's the same kind of person that I endlessly mock in this day and age when they stock up on, like, I don't know, toilet paper, for instance.
Yeah. They're both stupid.
So about the same time, a pair of widowers were separately reported missing. The last either of them had ever been seen was with a gentleman by the name of Herr Hoffman. But with the war now on in full, the investigations would lead nowhere. They were we've covered a number of these stories that have happened this is World War I now. I think we've covered a lot during World War II, but like a thing like a world war tends to interrupt a lot of local police work. When you're worried about being invaded at any moment by a, violent enemy nation. Anyway, so World War I was now in full swing. Around 1914, I think it was the end of 1914, like I said, the investigations into those disappearances and Herr Hoffman went nowhere. But then Bela Kiss was drafted into the Hungarian army. Before he left Miss Jakubik a fair sum of money to oversee his estate and, of course, to pay her. So basically, she was left behind to take care of the house, and he went off to war.
As people did. You give him a big fucking fat roll of cash, like, watch my shit. You go.
This is where, if you're making a musical, this is where, Act 1 starts to end, where the man of the house has to go off to war, and the housekeeper stays behind and hires a maid that sings songs to the children. Although I don't think he had children, but I don't think he had custody of children. So 2 years into the war, with military resources dwindling, the local constable remembered Bela's fuel stockpiles and told some soldiers about it, and directed him to his home. In his home, they found yeah. It's like he had the foresight to stock up, and the government themselves didn't. And they're like, let's take his. That's the story.
As old as
that's
time.
What happens. Yeah. So the army went to his house, where they found 7 sealed metal drums, and they set to commandeering the supply. However, as soon as they opened the first barrel, they noticed something was off. There was an odd and very unpleasant smell. And when they opened the drum, they discovered the body of a naked woman, basically pickled in a solution of alcohol.
And they're
which
like,
you can't really run
gas?
Yeah, I mean, the soldiers are probably like, hey,
still?
a prison. Yeah. They're like, well, we can't fuel our tanks, but I think the soldiers will be happy with this preserved naked woman. Let's pass her around. Oh,
as we know, the troops, support the troops, send them your pickled women.
One by one, they opened the 7 drums. Each contained the body of another woman in the same state.
Alive and well.
The discovery, yeah, and very drunk after being, left in a barrel of alcohol. The discovery of the 7 bodies was gruesome enough, but the constable knew that Bela had actually purchased way more than 7 drums, so they set out to search the property. At the end of the day, they ended up finding a total of 24 drums. Each and every drum contained the body of another victim. So, autopsies revealed that most of the victims had been strangled, though they think some of them were poisoned. In all cases, the bodies had been drained of blood before being placed in a methanol solution. So it was alcohol, but it wasn't like drinking alcohol. It was more like industrial alcohol. Which makes me wonder, he got all these barrels and people were genuinely, they noticed, and he was like, oh yeah, it's for gasoline. But they didn't seem to notice him buying a shitload of methanol. Like,
that's just his thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, we all have our vices. I'm drinking a Monster right now, so let it go.
So some of these reports, they were drained of blood and then pickled, basically, but some reports also indicated puncture wounds on the victims' necks, which of course led to speculation of Bela participating in vampirism.
Oh, he definitely did that.
Yeah, many of the sources that I found say prior to the murders, he had always had like a fascination with the occult. Though we've covered enough of these stories, I don't know how true that actually is, or how much of this is like the story getting twisted after the fact.
Yeah, because a lot of serial killer stories, they always try to go back and do that. Like oh, there was a fucking devil cult theme to this dude's whole life.
Yeah, there were signs all along.
I was like, maybe he was just a maniac.
Yeah. So it's unclear how many of the bodies they were able to like ever identify, although they were preserved pretty well, being in a pickled state. But 2 of the bodies were definitely that of his wife Maria and her lover, who would be the only male victim.
Oh man, shit.
Yeah. So they had not run off. But the housekeeper then directed authorities to a room that Bela had always kept locked and had instructed her to never enter, which should probably have been a big fucking red flag, but whatever.
Dude, I want to be rich and have a room like that where I tell like the housekeeper, like, never go in here. And then you do, and it, like, one day, inevitably you have to, but all they see is just like my crazy crab bobblehead.
Yeah, I was going to say something. I was going to say like a Funko Pop collection of just like the NSYNC members.
A single crazy crab bobblehead on a table.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then you're fired and you didn't find anything, as far as you know.
But it's still good enough that if you ever do anything horrendous down the road, they'll be like, yep, makes sense. There was a crab in a room.
It's like, no, that's not why I did it. I just like a completely stupid mascot.
You really don't even have to be, well, I guess you do have to be that rich, like being a homeowner myself, because you just have to have enough money to have well, and you have to have one room that you can afford to not use, which is hard.
That wouldn't be hard for me.
Yeah.
There's like, I haven't been down to the basement in this house in like weeks. So
it's a bit of a veer off of my topic, but I have dreams about like, in my dream, I'll be in my house, although my house in the dream is usually much different than my like real life house, but it's just one of those things where in the dream, you're like, yeah, it
feels like your house. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the dream, you'll find like a whole fucking like wing of your house that you didn't know existed. Like I found like, oh, this has a balcony over a garden that we somehow didn't know was here for 5 years. That kind of thing. Or I had one dream where I found like a whole like auditorium sized room with like a theater and stuff. And you're like, oh, that's really cool. We can like watch movies in here now. And you never question, like, how did I not notice a 1,500 square foot area attached to my house? Because it's never like they're buried like in a secret cave or something. It's always just like, oh, I've never looked behind this bookshelf. Yeah, but I have those dreams all the time. And then I wake up all excited like I have all this extra room in my house. I'm like, oh, and then you realize,
I have the same shitty home I always do.
Right.
Thought I had
and even though I like my house now, even though I really like our new house, it's like I've had a dream like that since we've been here. And it's like, now I'm a little less, like I'm a little more disappointed in the current house now because it doesn't have
this could have been so much
an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Right. Yeah. But anyway, so she's like, oh yeah, now that we found all these dead bodies, now that you mention it, there is a room he told me to never go into. We should probably check it.
Please don't go into my death room. Bye.
In the room, they found just like all sorts of letters and correspondence with, just women from all over. And it quickly became apparent that, of course, the Herr Hoffman of the missing women case was Bela Kiss. He had been using a fake name, it turns out, to like place personal ads in out-of-town newspapers to attract eligible single women, which it blew my mind how easy it was in 1914, around then, to be just place an ad, be like, yeah, I'm good looking and popular and have money. Come be my wife. And women from all over the country were like, sign me up.
I don't know if that's that surprising. I'm sure if some dude just tweets that right now, he'll get a wife.
I guess the difference is it was easier then to like leave out details about, well, although like I said, he was supposed to be attractive and whatever, but,
yeah, I mean, and isn't that really the basis of like, you know, Tinder and shit is like, just, you're not like, organically,
you're
like
not
building
your
a
personality generally.
Yeah,
it's just like
it is strictly
that's
like
unfair because there are a lot of women that aren't like don't fall for that. But yeah, you're right. If I'm an attractive male or female and I post a profile that's like shows that I'm successful, you're going to get a number of responses.
Yeah,
but
and that's
so he placed these ads to attract eligible single women. A lot of them were widowers, and they needed feign interest in marriage in order to gain access to their money, basically, before murdering them and moving on to the next. Two of the bodies that were found were traced to women who had filed lawsuits against Bela, although I assume they filed them under Herr Hoffman's name. Claiming that he had defrauded them. So basically, like, they had responded and then they had figured out that he was just using them for their money, so they sued him. But each woman went missing before their cases could be heard, and the lawsuits were just dismissed because apparently that's not suspicious enough to be like, I'm going to sue this person.
Yeah, great lawyers.
Yeah, now I disappeared off the face of the earth.
I don't care about free money. Let's sue someone else.
So... what makes the Bela case unusual, other than, of course, strangling and then pickling his victims and keeping them in a manner that he had to know eventually would be discovered, is that his serial killing didn't start until he was almost 40 years old. It literally, started with the murder of his wife and her lover.
As far as that's to be fair.
Well,
a lot of serial killers.
But I mean, they didn't really find anything at all. You're right. I mean, he maybe was, and maybe that's why his
maybe preservation was more of a focal point after 40, but who knows? Well,
and it could have been one of those things where he just had violent tendencies and he hadn't killed anybody yet, but that's why he was on his second wife and she left him for somebody else too. Yeah. It's like the whole thing you see online a lot where these guys are like, oh man, women are so fucking frustrating. I wish I could just kill one. I don't know why they won't date me. It's like,
because you just thought that.
You're right. So, I mean, there could have been some of that, but there's really at least nothing that I came across that suggests that he was murdering people before his wife and her lover.
Yeah, I'm just saying, there's like that BTK thing where he killed for a while and then he stopped for decades. Or something. Yeah. I don't remember how long, and then he just came back and started again, and it's kind of crazy. But I think in that
case, it's because he got a job as a cop and he could just kill people. They were now it's not serial killing. You're just
did he get a job as a cop? I thought he was He was like a dog fucking...
Yeah, I think I'm thinking it was one of those that they tried to solve for years and they finally did was a cop. But
was that the one they just sort of solved?
Yeah.
That was the Golden State Killer, right?
Golden State, that's right. Yeah. And I just wanted to try to sound like, current eventy by making an offhanded comment about cops murdering
fucking
people,
nailed it.
But, yeah.
Keeping our show modern.
Take that.
Take that. Fuck.
Anyway.
Quote,
so yeah, but it makes it unusual for somebody to just start serial killing at 40 years old. Normally it's, if you're going to like be a psychotic killer, you don't wait for 40 years.
Usually you try to blow up your life and everyone's around you, in your 20s.
Right. I mean, hell, even your teens sometimes is where you start with like the animals and the homeless people and move up to wealthy widowers. But, anyway, the housekeeper, Miss Jakubik, was arrested as an accomplice, though she was later proven innocent and released. So, but I kind of get it. Like, it's one of those, it's like, you've worked in this house with this guy and he has 24 dead bodies here. How could you not know? It's like, but, I mean, if he says, hey, these barrels have...
to go into the crazy crab room. How could I know?
So they arrested her, but she did get released. She didn't have anything to do with the killing. She was not like a accomplice helping him like lure these women in or anything.
And Bella's like, what the fuck?
Fuck. So as for Bela, he was in the military, so they're like, okay, well, we know he's serving in the military during World War I.
Let's make him finish, and then we'll...
Yeah. No. They set out immediately to like, hey, we got to arrest this guy. But as it turns out, the name Bela and the last name Kiss are apparently very common. It's like John Smith in English, like in Hungary, which hindered their search for him. There was a lot of Bela Kisses in the military, scattered all across who knows where.
Like, it was only kind of a joke. I really think the best strategy would be like, well, maybe the war will take him out anyway. And then just like wait for him to come home.
Yeah. Well, eventually he was tracked down to a hospital in Serbia where he was sent after, receiving some wounds on the battlefield. But before they could get there, he had passed away. Or at least that's what he wanted them to think, because they quickly figured out he must have known they would be looking for him, so he switched his paperwork with a deceased soldier and escaped from the hospital, where he disappeared back into the ranks of the military.
Interesting.
So...
Yeah. That, you know what? He's a piece of shit, but I gotta give it to him. That is the last place they would expect him to be. Is like right back in the military. It's a very easy place to disappear into during a war.
If it was like the Battle of One Tree Hill, not the hill, like the TV show, like people were just fighting about whether or not it was a good show. If it was some like just small conflict, maybe it would be harder.
One Tree Hill to die on.
But in the midst of a world war, it's pretty chaotic. And so you would think that these places had pretty good like tabs on their troops, but they really didn't. Especially, I mean, like I said, back then communication was way the hell different than it is today. So he tried to fake his own death. They figured out that he didn't die, but that's about as far as they got. They couldn't find him. But as you can imagine, word of a missing serial killer responsible for murdering and then pickling and maybe drinking the blood of at least 24 people quickly spread. Because that's a story that, tends to, it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a war. If there's a vampire serial killer out there, like people are going to pass that rumor or that word around. So sightings began to come in at regular intervals, but most led to dead ends. Except for one, authorities were alerted to a soldier going by the name of Hoffman, but spelled differently, which you wouldn't know since this is an audio podcast, who often boasted about how good he was with I always say it, garrote. Basically like the piano wire thing where you strangle people, from behind with a wire or sometimes it's like a bladed wire. But he would boast about strangling people to death, and his name was Hoffman, which was the same as the false name that he gave before, which seemed as a pretty credible tip. But of course, before they could get there to question and apprehend him, that soldier had fled. So fast forward to the end of the war. In 1936, there was a detective working in New York City who was known for having a photographic memory of faces. That's something that they, like scientists call a super recognizer.
Sounds like a fucking shitty NBC show.
So yeah, it's a real thing. Like some people can just like see a face and like remember it and recognize it like in a crowd. I have the opposite. Like I have clients that I've talked to every month for like 15 years that if I run into them at a grocery store, like them being in the store instead of being in my office is enough like removal of context that I'm like, is that person? I don't know.
It's a similar condition as like, you know, facial blindness, but it's more like it's a genuine not giving a shit about.
Well, yeah, there's that too. Like it's a combination of I wouldn't go so, and I forget that there's a scientific word that's way cooler than just super recognizer. Like I'm pissed at science for not coming up with a term for it other than that, but it's the opposite of that. And I'm familiar with it because I've kind of looked into it because I would say that I'm like on the borderline of that. There's people that like literally like it's almost like having amnesia, like they can't recognize people. And I'm certainly not to that, but I have very poor facial recognition skills. But anyway, this detective had the opposite of that, and he claimed to have seen Bela emerging from a subway in Times Square. Unfortunately, it was one of those situations where he saw him from like the other side of Times Square, and he could not get to him before the person disappeared into the crowded streets. Rumors did circulate that Bela was working as a janitor in New York City, but every time a tip came in, the janitor in question would vanish before they could be like caught and interrogated.
Jesus Christ, this is what Catch Me If You Can was gonna be about. And they're like, we gotta make this kid likable.
Yeah, we can't make him a serial, like, killer of women. But the actual fate of Bela Kiss remains unknown. But what would be interesting to me is, like, my guess is that, like, these sightings in New York and stuff probably weren't, you know, him, although it could be. But it seems like weird, like if he's a janitor and then the people are like, oh, I think that's Bela Kiss. We should interrogate him. Like the only way I could see him consistently getting a tip that they're coming after him would be that maybe he was an actual vampire. Like he was supernatural. So yeah, maybe this guy, like I have not seen, there's probably stories that it looks like there's been movies and books about him. There's
so
probably
I just
a graphic
opened
novel somewhere.
A picture of this guy. I don't think you have to have any sort of super recognizing power to point this guy out.
My guess is it's the military one where he's in his hat with a rifle.
Yeah, with the fucking mustache from hell. Like
the only thing is that by 1936, when this detective in New York would have seen him, he would have been in his 70s. So, like, you would also not only have to be able to recognize him, but also be able to, like, age him in your head. Like,
but the eyes won't change.
No.
Like this guy literally should be twirling his mustache. Like, you just find, like, the most evil-looking man in the world and arrest him and just say that's Bela Kiss, because you'll probably be right. 95% chance you'll be right.
And it's funny, because if you pull up like the Google images of him. I don't know. I know it can depend on your whatever algorithms and they come up in different orders. But for me, like just 6 pictures, like the second row down, there's one of him younger and you could see where they would describe him as a handsome man. You know, for the time that was he still had a stupid mustache, but like he's not an ugly guy.
Yeah.
But then, his military picture, you'd see him and be like, this guy is a serial killer that maybe drank blood. You'd be like, yeah. Probably.
Absolutely. Then again, you can kind of say that about any serial killer photo. Like, once you know somebody's killed somebody, you're like, we were talking about cults and shit, how those get lumped in. Anything kind of becomes believable once you've taken that step into, like, being a truly evil person, you know?
I'm trying to test this, and it's impossible because we know him, and it's so right. But I was trying to pull up a picture of Mr. Rogers and picture him as a serial killer.
Very easy.
And it's tough.
Nope.
I don't know. I think it's tough.
That.
Although there's this picture of him, it looks like he's holding a shoe and talking to it. I know what it is. It's from his intro where he's like talking. And so that, if you take that out of context, be like, yeah.
I actually, like, I've come to, once you learn more about him, I've come to like and respect Mr. Rogers a lot. But as a kid, I always thought he was fucking terrifying. And I still have that part of, like, he is a fucking guy who always needs to change his sweater, which I think is very weird for some reason. He talks directly to you, a child, and then he has a whole fucking world of evil puppets just around his house. Like,
well, and then the one that he talks to the most is named Mr. McFeely. Like, yeah,
like that's a murder.
It's a testament to, it's a testament to how good of a person he was that, like, you didn't just immediately for his entire career be like, he's probably a child molester.
Yeah. And, like, and maybe that says something about me, that you, like, a guy who genuinely just, like, went out of his way to be like, just like basically give kids pep talks and, like, some fucking self-esteem. And I'm, like, such a fucking miserable, like, self-hating person that I'm just like, even as a kid, I'm like, fuck you, creep. Like, there's no way there's no way I'm worth it.
I'm testing this with various celebrities. This is a fun game. Like, hard.
Could you believe it? You know?
Yeah. And this one would be easy. Yes, you could. Cause the next person I pulled up was, of course, Bob Saget.
Absolutely. Like, yeah. I'm sure. I'm not ready to close that case just yet, frankly. Sad reality is I'm such a, like I said, I'm so constantly suspicious of everyone that I'm like, you could show my picture and I'd be like, I don't know. He might have.
That motherfucker looks awful suspicious.
There's something about him.
Ben, that's you. You're like, I know, but still, it's in the eyes. I mean, look at it.
But I can't verify every date of where I was at any given point. Yeah, maybe that'll be a show. Just us, like, trying to decide who's not a serial killer based off their photo.
This almost like demands like the old video podcast like we used to do, but I'm thinking of games like, is this a professor or a serial killer? You know, you got to pick something. We can't do celebrities because we know who they are, but like, where you just take a bunch of pictures. Yeah.
That would suck.
I guess it would be more fun to, I'll do like, yeah.
You're just some regular dude, and then we pull your picture and be like, he looks like a fucking killer.
Yeah. That's the best. We've stepped on the line of being sued for libel before. I think that would get us on the other side of it. Yeah. But
the other side of libel, that's one of my novels.
The only other comment I had on Bela Kiss is how perfect of a name is that for a serial killer?
Sounds like a fucking lipstick brand.
It does. Yeah.
Well, so that's my inner Don Draper, constantly trying to turn everything into an ad campaign. You know what serial killers have that kisses also have? Passion.
Here would be a fun thing to do. We need to do this for every serial killer episode, is turn them into a drink that you could order at a bar. So like the Bela Kiss would be beef jerky and vodka. You know, just like
you just stir your vodka with some beef jerky.
Yeah, preserved meat and liquor. I mean, that's the Bela Kiss. I don't think
I've had dinners like that, like this year. So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you, a mixologist out there be like, you can't, you got to do like beef jerky and like habanero vodka or something. It's like, sure, do whatever, make it as fancy as you want.
Teriyaki jerky and vodka, you swine.
You just need some shriveled, dried out meat and liquor. That's the Bela Kiss. So anyway, that's all I got this week. It's short, but you've done. I know you did one on, and I don't know their names. I'd have to look them up, but like the guy that, like the acid bath guy, and you did one about somebody shoving somebody in barrels before, I thought.
Probably.
But I think it was the same. It was more to like break down the body. And this guy was like the opposite. But
yeah, like preserving the body is very strange. But apparently it wasn't. Apparently it didn't matter because he fucking escaped.
It's weird though. He's got that like bullshit thing. Well, I guess I can see it, but this like one woman cheats on him, so he starts murdering every woman.
I mean, that's where a lot of serial killers like targeting comes from. A lot of it is just like, who can you kill and get away with it? But you notice like a lot of it is like men directed at women, and a lot of it's like from usually it's not a direct trauma of like marriage. Usually it starts earlier than that. Like usually it's a trauma with like their mom or something,
right?
And there's that,
and it can be like as little and unassuming as like, my mom passed away in childbirth, so fuck all women. It's like, whoa.
But that's like, yeah. No, usually it's like there's it's a development.
It's an abandonment or some kind of abuse or just neglect.
Sometimes it's not even like abandonment. Like a lot of times it's just a really creepy, like blurring of the lines of sexuality.
Yeah,
and like, you know, these guys like are. That is the thing about like how much of like, we talk about it anytime we talk about serial killers, but how much of it is just a natural part of their brain going down that path, and how much of it is like an unhealthy environment. Because there's a lot of times where it's like you could talk to parents of these people and be like, and they would be like, we don't know what happened. But it's like, you know, you can, if you really dug deep, you would find instances of just like, well, you did these things, and, you know, for somebody at their age or where their head was at, like that was the worst thing you could be doing, you know?
What makes it so hard is it can be something that 1,000 other parents do with 1,000 other kids. But if the combination of kid and situation isn't, you know, it has to be just wrong, I guess. I won't say just right. But again, like I said, that's one of the things that makes the Bela Kiss thing so interesting, is there's usually that kind of development and you can trace it back. And this one was, by all accounts, he was a likable, normal guy. And then his wife cheated on him. So he murdered them, and it's like, I'm going to keep murdering. Like, well, that was kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, like there is cases of that. And, you know, I don't know why I always feel like I have to armchair fucking psychology this shit.
That's your thing though.
But it's like, something tells me that like he was trying to preserve the bodies. So that tells me it was about like, maybe the first wife, maybe the second, but it was about abandonment. Totally. I mean, it's always like.
Although then you add in the fact that he was like clearly using them to get their money. Like, it's like, what was that part about? It's like, well, maybe he just figured if he was going to kill him anyway, he might as well
make a business out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that stuff is really fucking weird. For sure. Of
course, it could have been deeper than that. You know, they all assumed, he was, you know, defrauding him. Well, maybe he truly was like, I'm going to marry you. I love you more than anything. Let's be one, and combined our assets. And then,
well, I think it's that like initial, like there's equal parts of like, never leave me. And also I fucking hate you, and all women.
Well, it could be. Yeah.
And that's.
But he fought bravely for his country in World War I. So
yeah, I'm sure it was totally out of.
No, yeah, I guarantee the fact that he, like, at his first possible opportunity tried to fake his own death tells you that he knew. He's like, it's been 2 years. Somebody has found these bodies.
I know that fucking bitch opened the door. I told her not to open.
Not to. Yeah.
There's no way.
But
he probably thought, he was like, well, they'll open that door in like a week. He was probably surprised that it like took 2 years.
Yeah, he had actually switched identities like 8 times by that point and just kept going back like, well, yeah, I guess I can keep using my credit cards for a while. I'll switch back to Bela Kiss for now.
Well, I guess I bet it went, at first he was surprised like, wow, they haven't really come got me yet. And then like after a while it was like, oh shit, I forgot I did that.
Yeah, somebody was sitting around talking and they're
I'm in big trouble.
the guys were sitting around eating their MREs in the tin cans, and one of them said something like, "Man, wouldn't it be great if they had a woman in one of these cans?" And he was like, "Yeah, oh fuck."
No, he murdered 20-something women the same way I pay my student loans, which is like years later. Remember, like, oh fuck, I have student loans.
Yeah.
All right, well,
you get that phone call. Yeah, we're just calling you today, sir. We gotta first off to remind you that this is a recorded line, but so have you murdered anybody recently, or just these 24? You're like, oh, you got the wrong number. I'm Kelabis. I can see the confusion. Goodbye. But anyway, yeah,
that was fun. We should take weeks off all the time, because I feel like we come back fresher. A bi-weekly, sure. Or would that be twice a week? What would be every other week?
Because English is fucking stupid. Bi-weekly is either twice a week or every other week.
Oh, sure.
So, yeah.
Well,
same
whatever the good one
or
is,
that
we should explore that business model. But yeah, thank you for listening. We'll, despite my great ideas, we'll be back next week with another one. Bon voyage.
Goodbye.